because
Yeah.
we're going to talk about a deck that has made some waves in the community this week, Neil. Some
I
could
still don't
argue,
think it's that bad.
some, I don't know yet. I
I,
haven't,
I,
I
I
haven't
admit
played
that
it.
everyone I've talked to about it, being you and Matt B, both are down on it, and it seems like the Discord community is also down on it.
Very much so. Yes.
So maybe I am the outlier and just wrong. I
Well,
obviously like.
I think I've gone through what I would call various stages of rationalization on this. So for those folks that aren't in Discord, it's not on the Facebook group yet. I'm sure it will be making its way there, and it'll be making its way to Reddit soon enough as well. But Carl Diaz put together a what I'm calling a rushing Hydra deck, right? Like it's a Hydra that is it's sort of after my own heart, right? Because I've been playing these Rhino decks trying to make Rhinos really effective in round one to deal 7 damage, and Carl has found a way to make a fully equipped Hydra in round one that's capable of attacking twice and doing 16 damage to your opponent. That in of itself is pretty scary.
It's just a combo deck, right? Like
Yeah, it's a combo deck.
lots of games have a combo deck,
Yeah, absolutely.
and it doesn't actually kill you immediately. I guess
No,
unless you have 16, unless you're one of the 16 health Phoenix Forms,
16 or 15 health Phoenix Borns, and you're gonna die. That's what's gonna happen. But for everybody else, that's more normal, right? Like, what you end up with is a meta game decision where the community is sort of talking about this and working through it, but they're saying, okay, we have to um, we have to now fix our first 5 if we see this dice combination, assuming that this is what we're going to get. I don't think that's a bad thing. Just don't, because I think it creates a level of sort of bluffing. Like, okay, well, I can show Charm, Divine, and Nature now, and not have Hydra, and make my opponent choose Charm, Divine, and Nature. To a first 5 that is going to be put together in such a way where
right? It's also dependent. Like you have to show Charm Divine Nature and either Odette or Aradel.
yeah, that's true. That's true. We'll get into the total pieces. I did copy Carl's deck um, from the Discord that he took to a tournament this week. This is the deck. It is an Odette list. It's running a 3-4-3 split, so you've got 3 Charm, 4 Nature, and 3 Divine. I think that's really good. He's got a plan when you talk about first 5. So let's lay out the first 5, because obviously this deck is all about the first 5, right? And he even says it like this. The most important thing here is getting a good read on what your opponent's doing, and then building your first 5 around that. So the typical first 5 is going to be Hydra, of course, because, I mean, how can we rush Hydras if we don't have a Hydra? Close combat. Massive growth. Okay. Golden Veil, which makes sense. We all have been running Golden Veils to protect big threats for a while now. And then it's got a Sword of Virtue as its typical. This is its typical first 5. So it's doing a couple of things, right? Okay, so the play order, just so we can kind of have a clear and concise plan here, is you play your Hydra first, because that's a main action. So you get your Hydra out and you make the first Hydra with no wounds on it. So we've got a Hydra. That has cost us one of our Divine dice. We have to be using the proper dice overall, but I think you want to keep your Charm sort of up. You're probably going to use 2 Nature dice to cast it, most likely. But you may end up with 2 Divine. There is the reason.
It doesn't really matter.
But let's just say those 3 dice.
With this opening 5, it doesn't really matter.
Correct. So now, your side action is if you don't have, if you're not threatening Golden Veil on your, if you haven't rolled a Power Charm, which rolling 3 dice, there's a pretty good chance for a Power Charm here. But if not, then you meditate into your Power Charm. And if your opponent's showing illusion, you should probably still meditate into 3 charm dice showing power side. That's just so that your opponent can't take away your timing on it and force you to use a side action, because timing is kind of important here. But we summon the Hydra. All right, so now a lot of people are saying, okay, well, great, my opponent just removes the Hydra, right? Like, we talk about this all the time. Like, I'm just going to kill the Hydra. I'm going to attack into the Hydra. I'm going to do whatever things we want to do, and the Hydra will, will not die.
I mean, you're not going to attack the Hydra. Very, very rarely will you attack the Hydra, because you just, like, if you've gone first and you made a unit as your first action, maybe you can attack the Hydra.
Yes.
But most likely, you're not going to have a dude that, like, attacks this profitably.
Correct. It's hard.
Like,
it's really hard, especially early on in the game.
Like, I suppose that there is a deck that could go, like, turn 1 Grave Knight, or turn 1 Hammer Knight, and then pass.
Grave Knight is the best answer to it, and Carl will tell you that Grave Knight is a problem for it, because you don't have enough time. If you turn 1 Grave Knight, then and again, this is if you're going second. This deck wants to go first. Understand that, number one, if you win the dice roll and your opponent is potentially showing Hydra Rush, the first way you beat it is by going first. Right? We can admit that, because you need to get a threat on the board. You also have to have a threat that can kill it if you're going to try to do that. The real problem is, even if you play Grave Knight and attack, you can just eat it with Odette. Right? Like,
yeah.
I'm pretty sure the Grave Knight, let me double check Grave Knight's wording, because it does have an ability on it that has something to do with blocking. It says that this unit must be blocked if able. So
you have to attack Odette, and then they have to run the Hydra in the way.
Correct. That's exactly what you have to do. You attack Odette, and then the Hydra has to do
right. So Hammer Knight doesn't actually do anything except 4 damage to the Odette.
Correct.
Because they would just guard it with the Odette.
Correct. So now, let's assume that, though, the Hydra's still on plan and has gone first here. Let's make that assumption. Hey, what's up, Ant? How's it going, man? I'll keep trying to turn Neil down. He's on a different computer again this week, so I had him turned up for when he was...
Sorry.
There we go.
My Omega loud.
I'm working on it. Try again.
Hello, hello, hello.
I think that's probably better.
Okay.
I was sort of driving him down as we were doing this, because, yeah. Omega, yes. Okay, so we're going to say the Hydra's still on plan. So you go... Now it's your opponent. It's your turn, right? You're the opponent. You've got to put something down on the board. Your opponent's threatening a Hydra. This doesn't look that threatening right at first, but if you play a threat...
Well, okay, so let's back up just a half step here. Sure. So this is your opener going second. I'm going second. This is what you did to me.
Right.
You're not going to attack with Shining Hydra next turn.
No.
Like, you're not. I'm going to assume that you're on this, like, random combo plan.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not going to attack with your Hydra until it's 8 power.
Correct.
So I know that you're not going to do it. Most likely your next turn is going to be...
next turn would
massive
be...
growth.
Actually, next turn is main action. It depends on what your opponent's showing. You can go Odette's ability, and you can do Enter the Fray, deal 2 damage to your Hydra, and pull 1 off right away to make a head. You can do that at this point. And then the next turn you can massive growth and pull ahead. That's one play pattern that can exist. When you listen to Carl talk about it, he'll also tell you that if your opponent has a no good way to deal with it, it is quite all right to massive growth your Hydra on this part of the turn, pass turn, and then next turn Odette it and just take the 5 from the Odette ability.
Oh yeah, you don't care at all about the kickback to Odette.
Not at all.
So you shouldn't even consider that in your play pattern at all.
Well, he says that you can decide, right? Like, you can decide which way to go.
Sure. I mean, when I say you should ignore it, like, if you're able to do it when the thing has 1 or 2 power, obviously that's better for you in the course of the game. But mostly, like, 99% of the time, that's not going to matter at all to the outcome. like whether you take 2 or 5. That is just like, this isn't a race most times.
Sure. I would agree.
So,
I would agree with that statement 100%. I just
especially because the decks that playing Massive Growth on are good against, I think is going to be, oh, maybe not. I don't know. It honestly doesn't make a lot of difference, I don't think. I think that you're gonna, like, you have a certain number of steps during the turn that you're gonna take, and there's an optimal order based on like what you see, but even that optimal order is like kind of here or there, you know.
Mhm.
You won't be able to close combat unless you have a target to do it with. But you know, ultimately, like, your goal by the end of the round is to have equipped your Massive Growth and Odetted your Shining Hydra,
Mhm.
so that you can put 2 heads on it.
Well, you can't. Odette's ability is a main action.
Right. I don't mean
Yeah,
all at
yeah.
once. I mean,
Okay.
by the end of the round, you'll have wanted to take these actions,
Sure.
like Odette, Massive Growth, make a couple heads,
Well, and that's where you can
attack,
still close combat
untap
if
with
they.
Sword of Virtue, attack.
Yes, but you can also close combat to get that last head on too. You can get to 3. I think it's 3 heads plus massive
Right.
growth, and that would take you up to being an 8 attack unit.
Right. The close combat is like, you have to have a target, right?
Yeah, your opponent just has to put something on the board, some sort of unit on the board for you
Right.
to
And
close
most
combat.
likely, like, they're gonna do that because,
Great.
like,
You still have to
how else
play
are
the
you
game.
winning?
Right, exactly. You still have to play the game.
So there are some, you know, avenues that are better, like the order of that you do that in is better one way or the other, but I think that's kind of like moot to our conversation about like what we're gonna, like,
Correct.
the deck itself.
Yeah.
Ultimately, like, you want to get all your stupid heads on, make an 8 power dude and attack with it twice with Sword of Virtue.
Right.
And
So you'd probably be sitting at 13 life on Odette in most scenarios. The
either
safest.
13 or 17, depending on the order you do it in.
Correct. That's right.
Um,
But I would
but
say
again,
this is the safest play, right? If you don't care about your life points at all and you're planning to win this on round 1 or top
you're
of
more
round 2.
likely to. Here's the thing about Hydra is that it's really hard to beat Hydra by attacking it.
Correct.
Like, I have to have 2 big dudes to kill it, because
Correct.
this thing essentially has, unless you have Grave Knight specifically, this thing has 5 life,
Right.
because you're gonna get at least 1 heal off. You know, the difference between 4 and 5 life is huge. The difference between 5 and 6 or 7 life is not very huge.
Right.
Just like attack it with 2 3 power guys, but like, you have to attack it through, because you might be at less than 13. Like let's say this is the ultimate like blowout where I play Grave Knight and attack your thing.
Mm-hmm.
I guess if it's Grave Knight, then your Hydra dies. But let's say I play Hammer Knight and try to attack your Hydra. You have to block with Odette going to 14, and you still have to like Odette your guy, so you could be at 12 or 9. And maybe you lose that race, but you're just gonna smash him back for 16 or whatever.
Correct. So this is where
And you're gonna kill their guy because you have the close combat.
right. I just think we should go through it to make sure that people understand what exactly they're going to be staring at. So let's just say opponent's second turn, they take their massive growth turn here, right? They probably don't have a side action unless they just want to get dice right for something, and so they may meditate again, maybe, but for the most part, they're not going to. So no heads yet.
You're only going to meditate once if you meditate at all,
Sure.
and you need one, because you need 1 frog, and like you said, you need 3.
Yeah.
Uh,
Correct. You need 1 frog and 3.
So if you rolled no frogs and no snakes, you need to meditate 4.
And again, if they're showing illusion, I mean the close combat is important. So I think.
Okay, so meditate 6. It doesn't, because you're going to win this turn. It doesn't matter. You just like take 6 off the top.
That's right. So okay, so we play the massive growth. Opponent takes a turn, does whatever they need to do here. If they try to target your Hydra to kill it, that you golden veil it. If they try to fester it, these are the kinds of things you're going to veil out, right? You're going to veil out the fester. You're going to veil out 2 shadows. A variety of different things. What is going to happen on your next turn is you're going to Odette as your main action, which will exhaust the Odette. She'll take the 5 we were talking about, and then you're going to side action and make a head. And you're going to have 1 wound left on the...
Yeah, and you'll have 1 damage on the thing.
1 damage on the Hydra. Now, why this is so powerful is because, not necessarily because of the damage output, because we can make 8 attack units. We've talked about this with Rhino, but what made Rhino so good was the ability to get past the 1 life blockers. And so what we've got here is in exactly the opposite scenario. We have Terrifying 1, and so it's caring about the attack value, not the defense value of the units. And so what we get into is the ability to see now...
Right. It wouldn't matter, like, if it was attack or defense. It's just that you get more than 1 instance of it and it stacks up.
Correct. So now my opponent takes a turn. This is when you would look like you would be open potentially to different things, but we're going to continue this plan. And so we're going to hope our opponent has a unit on board, and we're going to main action close combat. That's going to put a wound on the Hydra. We're going to kill something on our opponent's board, take a wound off the Hydra to make our second head. And then we'll flip this back over because I don't want to show him. We've removed a threat from our opponent's board. Hydra still has 1 damage on it out of a total of 8 life, so 7 life. It's going to be really hard for your opponent to deal 7, right? To do 7 raw damage. So all you have to deal with is direct removal abilities, and that's what the Veil's for. So unless your opponent has boarded 2 removals, it's not going to matter. So now I'm assuming at this point we've played a Veil somewhere along the line. We're going to go ahead and drop our last wound off.
You also spent these days.
That's true. So we're going to drop this off, and we're going to make the last Hydra head. We now have an 8 attacker with Terrifying 3, which means that the only unit that can block this is Grave Knight and Iron Rhino. That's it.
And Hammer Knight.
No, 3 or higher.
Is Hammer Knight a 3/4 now?
Yep, Hammer Knight's a 3/4.
It used to be a 4/3.
The only 4/3 is Grave Knight.
Okay.
So you'd have to be... Either your options are A, you're going to massive growth your own unit on your own board to raise its attack value to be able to match the Hydra, which you're still going to probably lose in that exchange because 3/4s are only going to go up to 7. So the Hydra's still going to live with 1, right? Seems not great. So really you are talking about Rhinos and Grave Knight as being the only units that can favorably trade blocks with the Hydra. Those are valid, but Hydra can chew up a Rhino here. Quick note: the FF uses 9 dice. You can charm debuff a 4 attack unit or divine buff the Hydra as it would be an 18 attack in round 1 instead of 16. Okay, so Carl has joined us. This is NIU Math. This is his deck, so that takes out the majority PBs, so I don't have to worry about that about round 2. Yeah, it makes sense. I think those are both valid reasons to have extra charm and extra divine. And you've got plenty of side action space here, Carl, for that. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that plan at all if it makes closing the game out. But so now we're ready to attack, right? So we're going to attack. We're going to deal 8, maybe 9 if we have the divine die available. Let it do its thing, right? So now we've got an exhausted Hydra. Our opponent, who knows what they've got, right? Who knows what they're bringing to the table, but they come after us or they come after the Hydra or do whatever they're going to do. We've assumed that they've already tried to use their 1 traditional first 5 removal spell. So at that point, when we go to the next turn, we just main action Sword of Virtue. We pull a couple of dice off the board, take our exhaustion token, and we're ready to essentially win the game. That's how it works. So 5 cards set up in the hand. No draws necessary. No digging through the deck necessary. It's just super efficient. It's as efficient as you can really get, right?
Yeah, so it's kind of like I was trying to, win by milling the whole deck kind of situation. Like when you start with 5 demonic tutors, you can probably win the game. And obviously Carl has figured that out.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about why this actually might be bad. Because in general, obviously this deck has a pile of random stuff, and it has
well, before we go too much
some
further,
kind of answers.
Before we go too much further, I just want to talk about some changes that Carl recommends based upon what your opponent may be playing. So he does have a feeling lucky first 5. I don't think I would probably ever take that, but it's Hydra, Close Combat, Massive Growth, Holy Relics instead of the Golden Veil and Sword of Virtue. So it seems really risky, and I probably wouldn't ever make that play. I just
it depends on what you see, right? Like there are some like dice combinations that don't have a lot of like aggressive things that deal with units, right?
sure.
So in that case, you get 2 more power out of it twice. But yeah, I mean that's very greedy.
Yeah,
And the
and
difference between like 20 damage and 18 damage is not like
it's not
22 is not important.
right.
And 20, the difference between 20 and 18 is not very big.
Right. I think if you leave an opponent, even if you leave an opponent that has like the 20 health, if you got a 20 health Phoenixborn, like even if you hit him for 18 or 16, 4 health remaining, I think there's enough tools in the toolbox of this deck to finish the game off, to deal 4 more damage. Right. So
Right, there's like 6 burn spells in this deck. It's
right.
got
Yeah.
or 9 burn spells. It's got Molten Gold, Frostbite, and
Right,
Sympathy
because you've
Pain.
got 3 molten golds, 3 frostbolts, and 3 sympathy pains. So like you just have enough. You have just enough draw to make that happen. You can just finish the game without ever having to worry about ever attacking again.
And it has 3 copies of Open Memories as well, which if they're at 4 or at 3 or whatever, you just go Open Memories for a Molten Gold and kill them.
Correct. And so the third situation is if you're expecting a Guilt Link, Lightbringer, Grave Knight, and some sort of removal, then you go Hydra, Massive Growth, Sword of Virtue, Raptor Herder, and Golden Veil. So you drop the Close Combat for the Raptor, and I'm guessing that's to pressure the Lightbringer. Would be my guess.
Well, the Raptor Herder is good against Lightbringer and Guilt Link because it just puts like random bodies on the table
right.
that you can use into both those abilities.
Correct. So that's right. That's exactly right. Raptor Herder gives you 2 units to sort of feed the Guilt Link.
Right.
And then you don't have to use your Veil to protect from the Guilt Link.
Well, you can't, right? You can't Veil Guilt Link.
No, that's right. You have to use.
It doesn't target.
Yeah, it targets the Phoenixborn. What's the other one? It's Vanish, I think, or there's another. There's another counter spell that actually cares about Guilt Link, and I can't think of it right now. But anyways,
that card's bad though.
Yeah, I agree. I would
like we're not playing that card.
No, I wouldn't want to put it in my deck. So the fourth situation is Guilt Link, Lightbringer, Grave Knight, and a big unit. So if you, I'm not sure what's bigger than Grave Knight, but I guess we're talking Rhino maybe. But this is hard to play Rhino on that board. So I don't know what qualifies as a big unit, but Hydra, Massive Growth, Sword of Virtue, Raptor, and Close Combat. So very similar. Still, just again, Guilt Linking Raptor is the answer to the Guilt Link. So
right, I think he's just, and maybe he can tell us in chat, but I think he's just talking about like in the case of an actual race,
right?
Like where you're forced to, like if you think that of a Grave Knight specifically, Raptor Herder is kind of like the same against that as against Guild Link, where you can just like sack your guys to the Grave Knight,
right?
Because it has to be blocked. It doesn't say it has to be blocked by everything.
So the other thing that he does is if he's seeing ceremonial, he does indicate that if I'm seeing ceremonial decks, he'll often replace the Sword of Virtue with an Enlightenment. So instead of going for the second big attack against a ceremonial deck in round 1, he'll just protect his Odette ability to still get the Raptor set up. I think that's fine. I think if you're seeing ceremonial, maybe it's a situation where you want to go second then, because
why is the Enlightenment good against ceremonial?
Because they can remove an exhaustion counter from your Phoenixborn. It just says remove an exhaustion counter from a target card. Probably worded bad. More so a combination of Grave Rhino and Bringer Guilt. Okay. Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah, so I'm guessing that specifically he's not talking about the Phoenixborn matchup if like you're trying to do a naming choke where like you've got naming and choke both happening, because obviously Enlightenment won't get you past that. But I I think outside of that, a standard ceremonial choke where you're just going to put one exhaustion.
Oh,
card
I
on
see.
PD.
Okay, so we're saying that I go first in ceremonial and I choke the Odette.
Right.
Then the remove a token will do it.
The
So
Enlightenment will do it. All right. So I think we've got this deck sort of what it's made up of and what it does. I mean, really, honestly, the other 25 cards in the deck are just to support closing the game. That's all it's about. So I don't think you're going to be grabbing Winged Lioness very often, but maybe, I mean, like if you can always open memories into Winged Lioness if you think you're going to need to play the game out longer. You know, because that's a reasonable summons to get on the board.
Yeah, just like a cheap dude that you can't guard.
Right, exactly. So it really is a race. Like this deck is really trying to race every deck, right, in the format. So
well, I like if it doesn't put you at like 2 on the after the first round, you probably lose. Like
maybe.
Like if you're playing Hydra and you put him at and you don't put him at 2 after the first round, like
I see. Okay. So he specifically is playing his
he's just playing it just to like bluff the conjuration count.
Yeah,
okay, I like that.
He's playing it just on his own. I got it. Cool. All right. So anyways, okay. So as we're talking about this and working through some of the details of it, we've had a lot of conversation. Carl and I have had back and forth conversation on Discord this week, talking about sort of different ways to potentially play around it. The consensus, my consensus, and I think yours too, Neil, is that the best way to play around it is to play 2 separate removal spells, so that you force the Guilt Link, the Golden Veil out, and then you can remove it. But that's not going to be easy, right? Like we're not talking like you can't first 5 2 Festers, right? So you'd have to either like Fester, Open Memories, or some other combination of removal.
Well, if we're talking about ceremonial specifically, they have Fester and Chains.
Blood Chains, right?
Which obviously Chains requires you to make a unit, but
I think but you just play like you first 5 an Ancestor's Army, right, or whatever, the Fallen Army, where you can make 2 Fallen off of it, and I think you're fine.
It doesn't matter. Like so, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but it seems like if I kill your Hydra, you're gonna lose.
Maybe. I don't know.
Like if you don't attack me with Hydra and your Hydra dies, like how can you win?
I think you're gonna always get one.
Is there another Hydra in the?
No, there's not. It's just one.
Okay,
Hydra.
then how do you win?
I think you're honestly my personal take is you're gonna get 1 attack off no matter what. An 8 attack is pretty big.
So I take 8. Yeah. I can kill your Hydra. How do you win?
I think that's where you win through the Lioness, and then just straight up Molten Golds and Frostbites and Sympathy Pains.
I think if you like, so the goal should be kill the Hydra before it hits you twice. I think, and if you do that, I think you've essentially won the game.
Maybe. Like, I mean, I'm not disagreeing with it. I've just not seen it in practice yet, right? I have not played the deck yet. Right?
Obviously, there are draws where like they could draw all 3 Molten Golds or whatever, and 9 you.
Sure.
And obviously, there's like, so if let's use 16 as like the thing, which is I think on the low end.
I mean, the maximum Molten Gold damage you can take in a round is going to be 6 because of the double nature, right? So you can open memories into another Molten Gold, and then
right. You could like Molten Gold, Sympathy Pain, and that does 8.
Right.
So it'd kill the 16 health ones.
Right.
But again, like you're gonna spend all 5 of your cards in your first hand on the Hydra.
Sure.
Like, so if I kill your Hydra, I guess we're talking about me 2 for 5ing you.
Right.
Plus a Phoenixborn activation by trading 1 removal spell for Guilt Link, 1 removal spell for all the other stuff that you've done.
Sure.
And I don't know how you come back from that. Like, I could put just a 2/2 in play and probably beat you.
Sure.
Like, because I'm just going to attack you. You're going to draw nothing. You're going to draw, like, I guess you can kneel me or whatever.
Yeah.
Because there's, like, kneels and
I think the deck has enough. It has enough outs, but it just turns into a burn deck after this, right? Like it that's what it turns into.
Right. I think that, so, I mean, if I was planning on running into a tournament that had this in it, I would count killing the Hydra before it attacks me as a victory.
Absolutely.
Like, that would be what I was planning.
If you can do it before, I agree. But before seems really hard.
And I would also count it essentially a victory if it hit me once.
Sure. Maybe.
Like, so if we kill it before, because if I have 2 removal spells, I'm just going to fire one off on it.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to Golden Veil it. You're going to do some more junk to like pump it up, and then I can fire another one off probably, right? Like, it takes you like several turns to set up this 8 power man.
Correct.
Because it's like a main action to make Hydra, a main action to make Odette, a main action to make Massive Growth.
You're talking at 4 main actions minimum. I mean, that's what you're talking about, because the Golden Veil is...
Three main actions plus 2 side actions makes a 7 power man.
Right.
And you could attack then. But I guess that's a main action too. So it's very likely that you'll just fire off 2 removal spells, and that'll be the end of it.
Sure.
Like, at which point the Hydra player should concede probably.
Well, the issue that Carl and I have, and many of the others on Discord have been sort of discussing is, to his point where he says he's got a bluff Odette deck where he's essentially playing Odette with the same dice combination but not playing Hydra, and that the purpose of that deck is to have you set up your first 5 suboptimally, where you do pick 2 removal in your first 5, and then you just get beat up by a more powerful...
Right, by essentially starting with a 3 or 4 card hand.
Correct. Yeah.
Right, so that... I mean, that doesn't bother me.
Yeah, it doesn't bother me either.
I spent some time today talking to Matt B about this, and like, he doesn't like it that way.
Sure.
That it's like this rock paper scissors thing where, like, if you have the Hydra and I don't first 5 myself, you beat me easily.
Right.
And if you have the Hydra and I do first 5 myself, I win easily.
Right.
And it just becomes this rock paper scissors.
Yeah.
Of that, essentially, where you're trying to next level each other
pre-game
by your first 5
before you've ever played a card.
But the thing about it to me is that a lot of people talk about, at least the amount that I have read on the Discord, and take this with a grain of salt because I do not have the Ashes experience to correctly, like if you just show me Odette plus 11 conjurations, like, I have no idea what the hell you're doing.
Sure.
Like, I am not that skilled at this yet. I don't have it memorized that way yet.
Sure.
If I see your dice, I know like what cards could possibly be in your pile.
Sure.
But, you know, up until this point, before Hydra was a thing, we still all sat down at a table, looked at each other's Phoenixborns and conjuration count and dice, and said, this is going to be my first 5.
Right.
And a lot of people say, like, okay, well, I have this one of for this, and I have this one of for this, and I have this one of for this. So in what way is this different than that? This has just pushed it to the limit, like, where if you do it, you win. If you don't, you lose.
Right.
That's not very different than playing a normal matchup and saying, like, okay, well, it's very hard for me to win unless I have this in my first 5, and it's much easier for me to win if I have this in my first 5, you know, for whatever matchup.
So, and that's I'm fine with that, man. I just want to be clear on it. Now, things get a little trickier when you start talking about Aerodel, but I think Aerodel telegraphs it a little bit more with 5-color Aerodel. So you have to play 5 colors.
So the thing that was on today or yesterday or whatever was the other dude's deck that was just an Aerodel deck.
Right. That
had these 5 cards in it.
Correct.
Which I think is awesome.
Right.
Like that dude next leveled everyone, right?
Sure.
Like, and he may not be the only one that did it. Like, whoever wants to take credit for it can fight for credit for it. But he was the first person that posted it on the thing. So let's talk about that for a second.
Yep.
Like let's say we know it has to be Odette or Aerodel because you have to be able to get the 2 extra heads off the Hydra from the Phoenixborn damage. So there's your first clue. Like, when you sit on a table, here's your first clue: Odette or Aerodel. Your second clue is that it has these 3 colors of dice in some number.
Divine Charm and Nature. Yep.
Right. So that's your second clue. And obviously, we don't know that either of those things is like like let's say we check those boxes off. Obviously, we don't know that this is a Hydra deck
Right.
because the 5-color Aerodel deck you're discussing just was an Aerodel deck that had these 5 cards in it. It didn't even have multiples of these cards or anything. It was just like, okay, when I sit down, if I see that you're look like a pile that doesn't deal with the Hydra thing very well, I can start the Hydra 5
Right.
and kill you.
No, you're right.
And, like that's just the natural evolution of like the meta once something like this is discovered.
Absolutely.
You know, I'm trying to think of a good example of one off the top of my head, and it's kind of difficult, but in the past, you know, there's these like
you played a lot of
meta
Destiny.
games.
You played a lot of
What?
Destiny, right? You played a lot of Destiny.
A little bit.
Do you remember back in Spirit of Rebellion when I'm trying to remember who the two were. It was like Poe Maz is what it was. It was a two elite heroes, Elite Poe, Elite Maz. And it was basically like this action cheaty deck that lets you sort of turn one play Millennium Falcons. And
Okay.
it had the ability to sort of just like wipe out an opponent's board very quickly and with very little interaction, right? You had very little time to interact with the dice because of the way Maz worked. And so, I mean, these kinds of things come up, right? Like this, and that's what this deck feels like to me. It's a very similar sort of like, I'm going to put together some combo pieces that, assuming it's consistent. I mean, Poe Maz was consistent. I mean, I took it in that Store State Championship season to a second place finish. Everybody hated it, right? Like nobody liked it to play against it, right? Because it warped the meta of the game so substantially for that period of time.
Did that game have any kind of sideboarding?
No, it was a best of one as well.
Well, I mean, this game's a best of one, but it has sideboarding essentially by picking first 5.
Correct. That's true.
Like Destiny doesn't do that, right?
No.
Like you just hope that like if that's a deck in the meta that's dominant, you have to have answers to it. You just hope you draw them.
Correct. And it had a very similar problem where if players built decks to beat Poe Maz, they hamstrung themselves against anything else in the meta, right? You were just like, here's how we're going to beat Poe Maz, and if I can't beat Poe Maz, then I'm going to turn around and you know, I'm going to win against everything else in the meta that's sort of good, but I'm going to lose to Poe Maz. And so this feels like we're sort of picking what you're going to lose to, right?
Right. So I'm going to preface this next little spiel I'm going to give with I don't know what Ash's competitive and I asked the same question to Matt B. It was like a set of several questions down the same line. To preface this, I don't know what competitive Ashes look like before 1.5.
Sure.
I don't know what any real tournaments, Gen Cons or otherwise, look like.
Well, there was I think they had and again, I don't know the deck makeup, so certainly I would need somebody that was a previous Ashes player to step in to comment any further. But there's 2 decks that everybody mentions existed. One was a Fallen Tempo deck, which we still see exist today.
This is old Fallen though.
Old Fallen, 1.0 Fallen.
Which was very different than...
Very different. And then the other was one that they termed the one turn punch. And so it was a deck that was built in a way that could one turn punch a Phoenixborn to death. So I don't know how those decks set up, right? Like I don't know what makes them different in Reborn or in 1.0 versus Reborn, but you know, this deck feels very much sort of like a one-turn punch. It's just doing it in 2 punches, right? Like we're just enabling 2 punches. But yeah, I mean, I think end of the day, man, like I don't think this deck is unbeatable. And Carl will tell you, like I don't know if he's still on the chat, but he'll tell you it's not unbeatable. The question is whether or not you're going to commit to beating it, and then if you commit to beating it, are you able to beat anything else?
So to continue my thing was like, I asked him first, how many people showed up at like the Gen Con level tournaments?
40-ish.
Okay. and how many different decks were represented there? I assume a lot.
I don't know. I don't have an answer on that. Never got published.
This game definitely, like, when the biggest tournaments are 40 people, I'm gonna call this game small.
I agree.
Which is not meant to be an insult at all.
No,
like, obviously we like to play it, but
right.
but you know, like, I've been to Friday Night Magics that are 40 people.
Right.
So if we compare it to that level, and we'll make the skill level of players better than a normal Friday Night Magic because they probably had to travel somewhere to do it.
Correct.
You know, it still leaves you open to like a bunch of different decks, and that's what Matt B told me, that he liked the variety of things that you ran into, right? So, and that's great. Like, you want to have a healthy variety in the game.
Correct.
So my counter argument to this, which may or may not be wrong, is that if you look at the big games at a competitive level, which right now I think the AIL is the closest thing we have to a competitive level tournament, which he also told me now has 40 people, and that's more than ever before.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, this AIL is almost as big as Gen Con. If it's not bigger, it might actually be bigger.
Which is awesome. That's super cool. And you know, he likes 1.5 better. He likes what it's done for the game better. Obviously, that's a difficult thing for me to speak on because I didn't play much before Reborn.
Sure.
But so when we compare this to games that have a competitive scene, like a real competitive scene, and you and I fight over this all the time, like it is a rock paper scissors, and it's a rock paper scissors between 3 to 5 decks, right? Like,
correct.
Like, that's the top 8 of big tournaments. So if there's a deck like this that is performing well, like you said, you decide what you lose to.
Right.
So do you think you're gonna run into a lot of Hydras? Like, you should play that way. If you don't think there's a lot of Hydras, you can hedge your bets by not even including first 5s that would be good against Hydra. You just hope that you dodge them all day.
Right.
And
we've seen this before, like, right when we were, like, even to take our experience from Orlando, right, when we played Transformers in Orlando, and that was 40 some players, right?
Right, that was about that size, yeah.
Yeah, so
44, I think.
40, yeah, something like that. I mean, when we played in Orlando and played Transformers in Orlando, like, the decks that day that ended up being the meta dominant decks were the Prime, the 3-wide Galaxy Prime, right? And I know our viewership probably has no idea what I'm talking about, but just understand that, like, that became the de facto standard at the top tables. It's like
the meta going into the tournament was like this stupid, like, one big dude plus thrust.
But it's sideboarded thrust, right? That's where I was going with that, because that was a best of 3. All of those 3-wide Prime controls sideboarded into thrust, and just took away the wide nature of the game. But, like, for me, I made the call to play a 4-wide Springer aggro deck, right? And, like, did really well into that meta, right? Because I had a deck that was positioned to beat that kind of meta if it existed.
Your deck was good in that meta for sure.
Right. Maybe that deck is not good in any other meta, but that doesn't matter, right? In that particular meta, it was good because that was what the primary amount of people were. And in my 9 rounds that I played, or however many we played that day, I think I played 6 of those Prime decks, right? Like, so I only had to beat 3 other decks, right? 3 other, you know.
You didn't even have to necessarily beat them, like.
Right. But
you would have so many. You have such an advantage in so many rounds that, like, you can drop a few, right? Like,
right. Because it's a big enough tournament that the Swiss rounds, like losing a round or losing 2 rounds in a tournament, is not going to keep you out of a top cut. Right, like maybe 2. I mean, you're going to get into tie breaks. And
right. What was your record?
Sucks. I ended up, I think, 7-2, and I ended up 7-2. I was playing at 7.
Right, because you punted in the last round.
7-1. I punted in the last round. Otherwise, I would have ended up 8-1 and played in. We just got a follow sub. I don't know what it was. Oh, Just Cam 82 is now following. Thanks, man. Appreciate that. That's super awesome.
Thanks.
So I mean, I think, like, when you talk about competitive nature, when you get outside of the kitchen table, and I want to be kind of like, I just want to be kind of cautious about AIL a little bit, because AIL allows you to change your deck every single week, so that's not really true tournament level, because it's literally a dice roll on what you're gonna, like, play against every single week. So there's really no way to prepare or understand and develop a real meta to go, okay, this is the meta, and now I'm going to build decks that play into that meta.
Right. So let's take a second and talk about that specifically, you bring up a good point there. So if we're playing in what I assume a real tournament format like Gen Con looks like, I assume that you register a deck and you play it all day.
I would assume so. Yeah. I mean,
That being the case, like if somebody playing Hydras gets to the top table, you're gonna know.
absolutely.
Like if you and I are playing in round 1 and you trick me with Hydras or whatever, I feel bad.
Sure.
But if you and I are playing in round 7 and
You
I've
know it's
paid
a
any
Hydra
attention to
deck.
the tournament, like unless it's like 1,000 people or whatever, like when you get to the end of the tournament, I'm gonna know you're on Hydras. And
Absolutely.
that's gonna put you at a big disadvantage. Unless
Correct.
you're doing something like the Herald Deck, where you just would at that point choose not to start your 5 Hydra cards.
And then there is really this sort of bluffing mindset that happens, right? Where you go, oh well, they have Hydras. I know they have Hydras, so am I going to play against that, or am I going to gamble that they're not going to play Hydras? And I think
Right,
that's interesting.
Right. So I again I want to preface this like I'm mostly playing devil's advocate here
Sure.
because I don't feel like I have a good feel for how these actually work at a high level. But ultimately for a game like this that is reborn just in its rebirthing stage,
Correct.
and all we have are these online games and a small community, the most important thing is probably to handle this in a way that makes the most people happy and the most people want to continue to support the game.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Which
I mean,
is
right
contrary
right.
to the opinion that I would have as a competitive card player.
Absolutely.
Where this, as a competitive card player, does not bother me at all. I just have to, like, if I'm going to go to a big tournament and I want to win, I have to be aware that it exists and play in a way that allows me to beat it.
100%.
And this game, like we were talking about how 5 Demonic Tutors makes the combo deck work, 5 Demonic Tutors also gives you access to your answers to it.
That's right.
Like, so...
That's right.
I think that I would, if it was up to me personally, I lean towards this being fine. It's very beatable if you know it's coming.
Mm-hmm.
But I also feel, and again, like, not to alienate anyone, but with a community this small and the biggest tournament's only being 40 players, this is maybe a half step above a Friday Night Magic or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
The majority of people, I think, will have the opinion that, like, okay, well, I like to have my deck and my plan, and I like to do my plan.
Right.
And you can't do that against a deck like this,
No.
And that'll turn people off.
That's right.
And
It
so
will turn
my
a more
plan is like
casual player away. That's what it'll do.
right, and
Yeah.
we don't want to do that.
No.
So maybe that's bad, but from a purely gameplay perspective, I think this is fine.
Mhm.
And I have a couple decks built here, and just some ideas of how you can beat it. Obviously, the number one way I still think is just start 2 removal spells.
Sure.
Like, you just have to have 2 ways to kill a Hydra in your deck.
Sure.
So that if you run into an Odette or an Aerodel with these color combinations, you can put 2 of them in your hand.
Right.
And if you get wrecked by some dude bluffing you, then you get wrecked, I guess. It's hard for me to believe that, those decks that are just bluffing the Hydra thing are very efficient or like are very, and maybe I'm way wrong, but it seems like if that's what you're trying to do, is you're trying to get an edge by bluffing, you're not optimizing your pile.
No.
Like you're playing cards to bluff.
Yeah.
And dice to bluff, and it'll like make your start rocky.
And this is where I go with metagames, right? When we talk about metagames, and I made this comment earlier, like I'm fine with a metagame that evolves. And so what I mean by that is if we do something to Hydra, if we do something to Massive Growth, if we do something to Golden Veil, I mean those are all solutions that people are talking about on the forums right now as like how to stop
we find
the Hydra
out
deck.
I assume that I was right about Massive Growth. We asked this a little while ago that the spell guard only affects the Massive Growth, not the unit.
And the reason why it does that is because there's a card called Dispel, which can remove an alteration.
Right.
And so if Massive Growth doesn't have Spell Guard, then Dispel can remove the Massive Growth. So
that's still bad. Like if you're playing Dispel to remove Massive Growth, you're not fighting what this deck is trying to do.
No, I agree, but although it would take a lot of the power away from it, for sure.
But you're trading you're trading a card in your hand for 8 life, assuming they do the rest of their stuff, but you're still just leaving them with a giant, unfair, unblockable guy.
Sure, I think that
because what are you going to do? You're going to start Dispel plus 2 removal spells.
No,
that's redundant.
You just dispel the Massive Growth and you take 8 instead of taking 16. that's what you do.
Right, but you just like leave this awesome guy in play.
Sure, but I think that you have to be on a plan that's going to still pressure enough on the board that you can race a 4-attack guy. I think you have to be, right. You have to be trying to race it at that point. And
I think you should not play Dispel. My PSA about this: if you're trying to beat Hydra, do not play Dispel.
I think it'd be interesting to see if Massive Growth didn't have Spell Guard, whether or not Dispel would be the way to
Right. And you can't even do it, so you definitely shouldn't. But in the hypothetical world where it doesn't have Spell Guard, still don't do it, because you're like leaving them with a 4/4 recover 4.
Sure.
That's unblockable.
Yeah. I mean, you have to kill it in one shot, right? So
it's gonna eat all your men. Like like let's say that you kill their Massive Growth or whatever, so they get off the combo plan, and the Hydra just like eats all your units.
Right. Well, I think there's a couple of things we were talking about ahead of time. You're still on double removal plan, but I still think you're on. I'm going to load up the deck that I played. I showed this deck on our YouTube channel this week. It's the deck I played in week 3 of my week 4, I guess, my third game, but my week 4. And this is the Herald deck that I played. This deck is designed to deal with large singular threats. Now, it's a little trickier because Hydra can heal, like we talked about, right? So, unlike a regular unit where I have time to go, okay, ping for 2, and win, like I can't do that with Hydra, because ping for 2, and the Hydra heals twice, and it still has 2 health on it, right? So, like, I just help turn the Hydra on faster in that scenario. So, there is probably some tweaking that would have to be done to this deck, but it revolves around the Hunter's Mark. And I think one of the things that you can do very profitably in this deck is Hunter's Mark and then attack with a variety of different units that you don't care if they die. And if they don't die, they don't die. But like any 2-attack unit, so like I would probably
if we're specifically talking about the Hydra matchup, all you gotta do is kill Hydra. So
right. So I look at plays.
It doesn't matter if they die back.
So what I would do is try this combination of items, because this is a very normal for me to play a single Fester in my starting 5, because this would be my starting 5 in this matchup. I would just leave the Salamander Monks in the board. I'd go Frostback Bear, Scald, Vampire, Fester, and Frostbite.
Right. So you're just playing double removal spell.
Right. I'm still playing double removal spell, but I'm still playing a deck. This 5 to me can play against just about anything. Right? I don't think there's anything that I can think of that's being played out in the game right now that this 5 doesn't do fine with. Can you? Maybe
it seems fine.
Right. Maybe Fallen. But I've got the dice available. If I want to get the Vampire back, cool. But I'm just saying, like, at the end of the day, I just have the ability, play Bear, still pressure with Bear, do the things that I would normally want to be doing to set up a board and create a permanent board state. And I can kill the Hydra through Scald turn 1 play. So turn 1, I would have to, if I'm going, I would want to go first. I want to be clear. I want to go first because we talked about that. I would mark the Hydra, play Scald, pitch the Vampire, and kill it. Now, if they have the Guilt Link,
they're definitely going to Golden Veil you.
If they have the Golden Veil, okay, they shouldn't Golden Veil the Hunter's Mark. But if they do, that's all.
The Hunter's Mark makes no difference.
Right. So in theory,
it just
right.
It doesn't matter at all.
So they Golden Veil this. Cool. I get a draw card. Whatever my card draw is fine. Whatever. So I've spent 2 sympathy dice to get that done. Okay. So now I have the opportunity to go ahead and just play Frostbite on my next main, and then ping it and fester it away. That's what I would do.
How many main actions is that?
It's
1,
3.
2, 3.
3 mains.
You'd still probably get in before,
I'm gonna get hit
like
once.
Maybe. Is that right? Because they'll go turn 1 Hydra, or if you're on the play, what are you doing? You're playing Frostback Bears.
Yeah. So
this is your first play. This is their first play.
And so maybe
your second turn is this plus this
to the Vampire.
Their third turn is now they can't Odette it, which is kind of funny. So they massive growth it.
So this is where I think the first turn play has to be Frostbite, and then you Hunter's Mark right away on the Hydra. Well, they're not going to have a Hydra out yet if you go first. So you
Right.
Frostbite.
That's what I was saying.
Then they play Hydra, right?
So we're in the mode where you're full in on knowing they have Hydra with just Dice and Odette.
Correct.
Where you play Frostbite first.
Yep.
Because that's slightly better.
Right.
Then you have no side action. They do this side action of maybe meditate. You go Hunter's Mark.
Frostbite.
Skull.
No.
Why do you Frostbite?
Because he's going to massive growth after this. So watch. So you go Hunter's Mark and Frostbite. Do 2. You turn off Odette. You force him to massive growth. Okay. So now you go main.
No, you don't force him to do anything because he'll just go side action head, make it go to 1.
Yeah.
Main action Odette it.
No. He'll main action because that puts.
Oh, he can't Odette it because of the Hunter's Mark.
So he's got a massive.
So side action head, main action massive growth.
Right. So
then
now
you go.
He's got 1 health on it, so there's 5 remaining here. So then my next play is Fester to try to draw the Golden Veil away.
So this right here is 8. You haven't spent Scald yet.
Why is it 8? It's 4.
So there's a massive growth on it.
So there's 7 remaining.
Okay, so it's got 7 left. So you can't even Scald it because you've used your Frostbite.
That's true.
So you Fester it. They Golden Veil.
Yep.
You have no side action, so they go side action head, main action. Odette it, I guess.
This is where they would, they would definitely Odette it at that point.
Unless they're afraid of you burning it, but it doesn't even matter because they still have the Golden Veil, so they Odette it. They put 4
they Golden
on
Veil
it.
the Fester, otherwise it's dead.
Oh.
So at that
so
point,
it depends. This is a decision point for them because if they Odette it, they put it in range of Scald or I'm trying to think of anything else that would, because it would put 4 on it at 4 left. So what else does 4? So it only has to do 2. So there's a million things that hit it for.
Because I still have the ability in this board to just go ahead and play Bear and attack it with Bear for 4. Also, like to finish it if I just want to finish it. Right.
So let's say that they play correctly. Let's flip this over. What is this?
That's my deck.
Oh, let's not flip this over. Where's the rest of their hand? Okay, so we have this in the bin and this in the bin.
Mm-hmm.
So we have close combat and Sword of Virtue left. So here's a decision point where they decide to put 4 on it with Odette or not.
Mm-hmm.
If they think they can get away with it, they put 4 on it. Because they've already made a head this turn, so they're not actually gaining anything by putting 4 on it here other than action efficiency.
Right.
So if they think they can get away with it, they can put 4 on it. And then you can freely Scald them.
Mm-hmm.
If it was me, I would just be happy with a 7 health guy here, thinking that like there's a million 2 damage things that could get me.
Right.
Because you only have to do 2 to it once I put 4 on it.
Correct.
Because it'll double with the Hunter's Mark. So let's say I don't do that and I just attack. You take 7.
Correct.
And what do you do next turn?
How much life is on the it's empty Hydra right now still?
Yeah, it's 8.
Okay. I think you got to play Master Vampire.
So you just hard cast Master Vampire.
Yeah.
Okay. So what dice have we spent? Because we haven't been keeping track. You had to spend one of these on this.
Yeah,
you haven't spent these.
because we haven't spent this.
But you spent this.
Correct.
So now you're playing Vampire, which is this and this.
Why did we spend the other ceremonial on the Fester? Yeah, okay.
And something, probably this.
Yeah.
So you play Master Vampire, side action of what? You gonna shoot him with a frog if you have it?
So the other thing you have for reach, just to be clear, if we got to get 8, is I can frog it for 2 as a side, play Scald into Vampire, and kill it that way.
Oh well, that's definitely what you do then.
Yeah.
You definitely don't play Vampire.
Yeah.
So if you have a frog, you frog it and then Scald it, and that will kill it, and you probably win.
Yeah.
Because you're just gonna like play bear
And then just
make a bear, and it doesn't matter. You'll just have like random 2/2s to kill him with,
right.
because you'll have killed the thing. So again, double removal spell, good.
And again, this is a first 5 to me that you could play in this deck all day. You know what I'm saying? Like it's not a
Right. Scald is better than a regular removal spell because
I end up with a 2/2 unit on the board.
right, and it draws you a card. It does a lot of things that like makes it so you're like, if you play Fester, like let's just say if this was a Fester, like you have 2 Festers and they're not on Hydra, you're like behind because these don't do anything.
Right.
But Scald is always going to do something regardless of the game state.
Correct.
So you don't really get put down by having Scald.
Correct.
This is just another reason this is my favorite card in the game.
Yeah.
Because like let's say they're on some weird control deck with these dice, they're not even playing dudes, you still just get to play a 2/2 draw a card and laugh at them. Like,
well, the other thing you can do in this deck, if you really want to, is play a single Flash Archer in your starting 5, just to ping for 4 without the Hunter's Mark. I mean, that is an out, and it's actually a decent out in this place also, because if you...
your vampire, like if we're in a situation where you know they're on Hydra, you should have taken the 4 health guy,
right,
or the 4 cost guy,
right, because then even if they massive growth and just once they've GV'd the Fester away, you can just Scald and kill it without even needing a Hunter's Mark. So if they actually GV the Hunter's Mark, which would be bad for them,
and the 4 kills it through the massive growth with the Hunter's Mark.
Correct.
So yeah, so double removal spell, good. That is what we've decided. Like obviously gonna be away. So let me show you a couple ideas that I had, and maybe we should play a game of alternate ways to beat this that isn't just start double removal spell.
Yep.
And I'm not sure if these are going to work. This is purely theoretical.